Major Spoilers podcast covers news, reviews, and of course, spoilers, and goes into details about the topics discussed. So if you haven't read, listened, or watched the items we talk about, you might want to come back later.
I'm Matthew.
And I'm Steven, and you're listening to the Major Spoilers podcast, the podcast for pop culture and comic fans.
In this issue, Rivals on the Void. Into this house were born the Void Rivals. It's a stealth Transformers pilot with a literal Transformer and a literal pirate. Plus, we talk Chapter 11, explore the Savage Land, irradiate some mice, and get funky. We always hang in a buffalo stance, but we're bigger fans of their wings and their nickels. So shuffle off, soldier on in the heart of America. Yours is fast and mine is slow. The Major Spoilers podcast is on the plains.
Welcome to issue 1109 of the Major Spoilers podcast. Thank you so much for downloading and checking us out this week. We begin our big, giant experiment as we explore the Energon Universe, the Transformers at Skybound Entertainment, as we look at the first volume of the Void Rivals, not the Roid Vivals. That would be weird.
Roid Vivals. Roid Vivals is actually The Rock's new movie. He and Jason Statham.
Which is really weird because they can't be opposing one another because neither one of them can lose their fights. So,
they lead teams of people, and the teams of people fight.
Here's some things that are interesting around the web. Diamond Comic Distributors, the people that used to distribute comic books, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It was announced today. For those of you that don't know what Chapter 11 bankruptcy means, it means that, hey, we don't have the money to pay our creditors, but we think we can turn this ship around. Mm-hmm. Hey, courts, can you tell these creditors to get off of our backs for a little bit of time until we can restructure?
Yep.
And it allows the company to continue business as they attempt to restructure or find somebody who is going to purchase them or purchase portions of the company. There was a non-binding letter of intent from Universal, which is a distribution company Universal Distribution out of Canada, has said that, hey, if this doesn't come around, we would like to be considered for this. We would like to acquire Diamond UK. Diamond UK has said, yeah, we're doing fine. If anybody wants to buy us, we're doing fine. No problems here. There's also a game distribution unit called Alliance Game Distributors that somebody has submitted. I guess it's also Universal has submitted a $39 million bid for that. If it goes on the auction block, they're the ones that have the opening bid. And then who knows what's going on with Diamond Comic Distributors, Book Distributors, the Collectible Grade Authority, or Diamond Select Toys, which is ironic because I got a press release of new toys coming from Diamond Select Toys in the coming weeks and months. So a lot of people are concerned. What does this mean about my comics? Right. Some people are upset about this news, about a distributor going under. And there's also a very large number of people that are very happy that Diamond is going under.
I've seen, I'm not going to say nothing but jubilation, but I have seen some Nelson Muntz, and a little bit of couldn't have happened to a nicer bunch of guys. And honestly, I don't agree with that. But having, 10, 15 years ago, working as someone who at the time, all of our material came through Diamond as a comic distributor, I understand it. I mean, Diamond took almost gleeful joy in the fact that at a certain point, for a long time, they were the only option you had.
No, they really were. Up until 2020, when the pandemic happened, they were literally from like 92 or whatever until the pandemic. They were a monopoly. They held the comic industry's balls and squeezed them whenever they wanted, and the industry could not do anything about it. If you were a distributor, well, how else are we going to get our comic books into stores? We have to go through Diamond. If you're a comic shop and you're like, hey, you sent us a bunch of banged up cornered books that people aren't going to buy, Diamond would just squeeze those balls and say, well, what are you going to do about them? What are you going to do?
Literally. And, Diamond shipments were and I say this circa 2010, 2011, routinely wrong, incomplete, damaged, problematic, lost. And there were a lot of times where it was something that just felt like, well, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't do anything about it. We don't have any impetus to fix it. Now, I am told that the last few years have been better in terms of damage to a point, but I'm also at the point where I don't blame people for looking and going, ha ha, and saying, ding dong, the witch is dead, because Diamond did very much take advantage of being the 600-pound gorilla. And, there's Schadenfreude in all of us.
Oh, yeah, no, but believe me, I'm one of those people that are kind of in the background going, ha ha, because, I mean, they had multiple attempts. They were told multiple times, if you guys fix this, we can continue this partnership. We can continue this deal. When Diamond went full lockdown during the pandemic, and there were publishers that were still saying, hey, we would like to try to keep our industry alive. Can you work with us? And Diamond was like, nope. There were people that are like, okay, I'm sure there are other people working for us that will work with us. And that is the thing that I think ultimately has made Diamond fall, is when DC Comics said that they were going to go through Lunar and the other distributor during lockdown. And there was nothing that Diamond could do about it. I'm sure DC or Warner Brothers paid off a hefty chunk to break that contract. But DC has never been back through Diamond. In fact, anybody who gets their comic books, their DC Comics through Diamond actually has to go through someone else to get those comics. So they're paying a retailer price instead of a wholesale price for those comics. And then once that happened, of course, that opened up other publishers like Marvel saying, hey, Penguin Random House, how about you distribute our comics? And Penguin Random House is like, yeah, we can certainly do this. We distribute stuff all over the world. And when you have DC and Marvel both out at Diamond, that's your big two. That is the bulk of your income that is coming in. So your warehouse space is going to be a little bit emptier, but you still have to pay for that warehouse space. You still have to pay for those employees, even when I think a couple of years ago they announced a bunch of layoffs. You still have that kind of overhead that you have to deal with. And then, of course, other companies started to leave as well. IDW, Dark Horse left to go to Penguin Random House. DC is now with Universal Distributors, the same company that is looking to buy Diamond UK and also the Alliance Game Distributors. Boom Studios is owned by Penguin Random House now. They were supposed to switch over in July of 2025 to be distributed through Penguin Random House. That may happen sooner. Tokyo Pop is still distributed through Penguin Random House. Lunar distributes Image Comics. And so that really leaves Dynamite, Titan, Archie, Zenoscope, Distillery, American Mythology, and a lot of the other smaller publishers who are still with Diamond. So they're the ones that are kind of in the tight spot now because of what Diamond has done.
Now, this is my question.
Okay.
I know that Diamond was like part of Jeppy Enterprises.
Yeah, they still are.
Okay. Now, this is Diamond DCD that is Chapter 11, not necessarily Jeppy Enterprises is still out there doing their thingama.
So
is that correct or no?
This is, let me see if I can find that simple answer for
the Jeppies. Last I knew, the Jeppies still owned like Gemstone Publishing, and they had a museum and they had a bunch of other stuff.
Yes. So from what it looks like, it's, and who knows what Jeppy is doing. It looks like, this is only affecting the Diamond portion of, the things that I mentioned, Diamond UK, Alliance Game Distributors, Diamond Select Toys, and the Collectible Grading Authority. So Jeppy may still be doing something else, very much like when you look at IDW Publishing, when it was going through some issues. IDW Publishing is a comic book publisher under the IDW, I believe it's IDW Entertainment. IDW Entertainment also has IDW Games underneath it, and I think one other thing. The IDW Games shut down. IDW went through some restructuring. IDW Comics could still go away, but the parent company because these things operate as independent businesses from the corporation, can continue. IDW Entertainment could continue if the comic part of it went away. And the same way when the games part of it went away, they can still go on.
You said that IDW is one of the Penguin Random House people, right?
Yes, they are now with Penguin Random House, which does bring up, I saw some comments today where I forget the exact comment that someone made. Let me see if I can find it really quick, because I was like, well, I guess people are still kind of confused about how things work, because the comment was, the person said, half serious, how does the industry move forward without an evil monopoly? And my reply was, many are moving or have moved to Penguin Random House. So ... There you
go.
People who aren't familiar with Penguin Random House, go look it up. There have been so many complaints, concerns, decries that PRH is its own monopoly for the book industry, that, yeah, all these people that are moving over or have moved over to Penguin Random House, they're in that same boat. Now, Penguin Random House may be one of those companies that's too large to fail. I don't know. But
there's like 5 things that I know, historically, I'm like, oh, this is a big publisher. And I'm like, oh, now they're just part of the Penguin Random House.
Exactly. So there is that. So what does this mean going forward? Does this suddenly mean that you're not going to be able to get your comics? No, because under Chapter 11, Diamond is going to continue to distribute comic books. Apparently, based on the press release that I got from Diamond Select Toys, they're still going to be distributing their toys. Does this mean that Free Comic Book Day is not going to happen this year? Diamond has said that they're still committed to making sure that they are the sponsor of Free Comic Book Day 2025. Is there a Free Comic Book Day coming in 2026? That'll be seeing what happens on how long this Chapter 11 bankruptcy is allowed to go. This is just a filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It still has to be approved by the courts. My understanding is that JP Morgan Chase has agreed to provide $41 million in debtor in possession financing, which I'm not really sure how that works, but basically it seems to imply that there's debt being applied to debt to make this happen. Basically an emergency loan that we will back you, and if it fails, then we own you, or we're going to sell you off for parts. Which may be why that Alliance Game bid for starting bid for $39 million was announced. That may clear off some of that debt. So for now, it's business as usual. My hope is, and I'm sure this is, I mean, if you go back and look, and I even went back from 2020 through just December of last year, December of 2024. There were constant press releases that were coming out that were like, so-and-so is now with Penguin distributors. So-and-so is now with Lunar distributors. So publishers have been figuring out ways to move to other distribution outlets fairly quickly over the last couple of years. I suspect that if Diamond were to even announce tomorrow that they are out of business and they're no longer distributing comics, and that they have taken all their monies that they've gotten from JP Morgan Chase and are flying off to a country that doesn't have extradition, I would bet you dollars to donuts that you would still be able to go into your comic shop and pick up your comics as usual. It would be so easy now, wherever those comics are stored. I think Diamond is in Missouri or Mississippi. I forget where their main distribution warehouse is at. But yeah, Image Comics would need to get their stuff out of the Diamond warehouses, or Titan would have to get it out of the Diamond warehouses over to Lunar or over to Penguin and get those out. So I don't think that there's going to be a big disruption in comics getting to the places where they need to be. And because Penguin mostly is what I'm going to talk about here, because they have greater access to bookstores, I think that might be an actual good thing to get more comics into bookstores as well, with some of the deals that they could strike. So that's some food for thought.
Yeah, it's Mississippi because they closed the warehouse in Plattsburgh.
Yes, That was during COVID. They closed that and didn't reopen.
Yeah.
Yeah. One other thing I was going to say on this, I don't know if you have anything else you want to say, Matthew, on this whole thing.
I mean, I'm not necessarily one of the people who wants to say, ha ha, but
I mean, the feeling is there. I mean, the feeling is there.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, when you have been abused, and word about abuse comes out, there's certainly this reaction of, oh, that person was a horrible person. Never should have trusted them, or I feel betrayed, or in this case of Diamond, where they literally were bullies in the high school, and then the bullies, 3 o'clock high comes around and the bully gets his, then, you know, I think there is a little bit of cheering and laughter that needs to happen when the Adams State Adams get their comeuppance. I think it's good to laugh and to cheer for the nerds. And so I think that's kind of the same thing that people are feeling right now with Diamond. Okay. Here's the part. This is what I wanted to say. I remembered. Here's the part where this could be problematic. If these companies who have not switched over to Lunar or to Penguin Random House, those companies, new companies like Distillery, which has only been around for about a year or two, how are people going to order their stuff? How do you, dear comic buyer, go into your store and say, well, hello, Mr. Comic Book Proprietor. I would like to place an order for a new Distillery comic book, please. Where do the comic book shops order from? There's probably not going to be a Previews catalog anymore. Heck, Previews isn't even Previews anymore. It's a shell of its former self. Certainly companies like DC and Marvel are releasing their own catalog of comics that are coming out. But you know, that may be a bigger problem for smaller publishers if they don't have a distributor that the comic shops can order from easily. Some people have been asking questions like, hey, what happens to the ordering system that Diamond forced down everybody's throat? And there's no answer to that yet. What happens if Diamond goes away and they can't support that software system anymore? That could be the big problem spot. Getting the comics from the publisher to a comic store, not going to be a problem. Getting the stores to say what comics they want and finding a lot of smaller publishers to support, that's where I think we're going to have the sticking part. And if I remember correctly, that kind of happened in the 80s, Matthew. In Kansas City, we had in the Kansas region, was it Action Comic Distributors or whatever it was? They were the ones that were delivering to us, like Thursdays were new comic book days for us. But when they shut down or when they got bought out by Diamond, I want to say it was a couple of weeks of disruption to figure out how do we get these new comics and where are we ordering from? Do you remember that time?
To remember, there were quite a few actually. I know Cap City was still out there, and gosh,
because I know our comic shop used to get shipments from 2 different places.
Right, but comics would come in on Tuesdays and on Thursdays.
Yeah,
Action Direct.
Yeah, that's who I'm thinking of.
They went under in 87,
85. Yeah, and then their assets were acquired by Cavco Longhorn.
Oh, well, all right.
Yeah.
See, I remember the days of Bud Plant distribution.
Alternate realities distribution. Yeah.
Yeah. The Bud Plant stuff was big when I was very, very, very young, because that stuff would be when I would go and buy like Shogun Warriors comic books, the late 70s.
Yeah. So there you go, listeners. That's what I know. You probably have the same information that we have on that. But somebody was like, are you guys going to talk about the Diamond Chapter 11? And I bet I got flooded with like 30 different emails and direct messages today from people going, oh, did you hear about this? Did you hear about this? And it's like, yeah. I mean, Chapter 11 bankruptcy happens a lot. I think, what is the one that is the one that is most dire? Chapter 7 bankruptcy.
I can't remember if Chapter 7 is the worst or Chapter 13.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Maybe it's Chapter 13. But yeah, you can go and look up the different bankruptcies and figure out which one is which.
Chapter 7 is the one where they liquidate your assets.
Yeah.
So they sell your stuff, whereas Chapter 13 allows you to basically you're setting up a repayment plan.
Oh yeah, that's for personnel. That's for individuals.
Yeah.
That's if you're in debt
But
because
I
you
don't
have
know
to
how
go and get a
companies
CAT scan,
work.
and you find out CAT scans are like $5,000 to $10,000 these days.
You know, I can scan the cat for $50.
It's still too
All
much. I don't think
really
my
need
insurance
a
is going to pay for
flashlight.
that.
I'll just hold him up.
Hey, let's talk comic books. Before we get to the comic books, listeners, if you want to comment on the Diamond Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing, you can head over to our Discord server. You can join the Major Spoilers Discord server absolutely free. We'd love to see you over there and join our growing group of awesome people. Link in the show notes, and a lot of people waiting to say hello to you when you arrive. All right. Out last week, we talked about it before. Marvel is doubling down on all the what if stuff. Last week, we had what if Mickey and Friends became the Fantastic Four?
What if they did? Have you ever considered it? What if? Okay, so here's the thing that you really need to know about the Fantastic Four. You remember how the Fantastic Four has a genius?
I mean, yes.
Yeah. Well, there really isn't one in the Mickey Four.
There's a difference about genius level IQ and also being clueless.
Right. But I'm not saying that Reed Richards isn't like, Sheldon Cooper with stretchy pants. But okay, so this story opens, the whole
I've got stretchy pants.
That's true, so do I. So we open with the characters seeing the big flare in the sky and go, oh man, it's time to be there. So Goofy is, of course, working with Horace Horsecolor. Now, this is the thing that I do love about modern Disney. They bring back the obscure folk.
Oh, yeah, they've been doing that for years.
Yeah, Minnie is hanging out with Clarabelle Cow and watching The Real Housewives. But Donald is just trying to figure out, you know how Donald never wears pants but always wears a shirt?
Yeah.
Well, he's the thing now, so his shirts are all ripped. So now he has to wear pants.
Okay.
And, of course, Mickey is Mickey, and Mickey's very stretchy. But it turns out that it was not a Reed Richards foolishness that got them into space. It was, in fact, Gyro Gearloose trying to make a new ride.
Oh, does he become Dr. Doom? Please tell me he becomes Dr. Doom.
He does not become Dr. Doom in this issue, because this issue is a parody of the first appearance of the Fantastic Four. So they have to fight, of course, the monsters of the Mole Pete, who lives under Monster Island.
Okay.
It's interesting. I mean, seeing, evil Pegleg Pete as the Mole Man is pretty satisfying. Honestly, he's a better Mole Man than Mole Man. And
I mean, it would have been great. It would have been great if they could have gotten like the mole guy from Wind in the Willows movie to be the Mole Man.
That would have been a deep cut. That would have been maybe too deep of a cut, because I don't know if I'd even noticed that. Although I do know that the Moloids are played by the little guys from Darkwing Duck, the little underground guys who look like schmooze.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But basically, the Mole Pete is trying to steal all of the gold and jewels and riches, and he's using a song to control the monsters of Monster Island. Fighty, Mickey can stretch. Donald is a barbarian. Rawr. I think the best part of it is that it does end with the Fantastic Four flying bathtub fantastic car.
Nice.
And I think that the thing that I was really worried about, because, when celebrities are drawn into comic books, you want them to look right. Like Gillian Anderson never looked right in the X-Files comic book.
The Topps X-Files book.
Exactly. Mickey and Donald and Minnie and Goofy, who are, probably bigger celebrities than Gillian Anderson in many ways, all look fabulous.
Oh, of course. I mean, it's owned by the same company, so.
Well,
and technically, the title of this book is Marvel and Disney, what if ... Mickey and Friends became the Fantastic Four. So this is definitely, and it has been for years now. I think I want to say going on, this may be the start of the third year that we've started to see this synergy of Disney characters as Marvel heroes. At first, it started out as a series of variant covers. Then last year, we started to see the what if Donald Duck was Thor, or what if Donald Duck was ... And now, it just continues on with that. So for these characters to be on brand does not surprise me at all.
Not me either, because if you look at the creative team, the Disney Europe, Edizioni BD, so Lorenzo Pastrovicio, who is one of the guys who's been drawing European Disney books for a while, colors by Lucio Ruvidati, Riccardo Secchi.
Oh, so this is all the Italian Disney artists on this series.
Yep.
Oh, that's cool.
They are excellent. They are really excellent. And it is amusing. I feel like there's a problem for me, because I want to do, if I say these guys, hey, look at these artists, they're really amazing, and the story is just kind of like, it still kind of rounds out to about a 4 out of 5 slice of meatloaf book. It's a clever sort of thing, and as with any crossover, the real hook is, how do you approach the material? So approaching the material by having Gyro Gear Loose trying to make a new carnival ride, that makes perfect sense. And then you can transition into semi-parodic superhero adventures. And you can have Mickey's ears always off center, because otherwise he's looking directly at you and it's really unnerving.
So is this kind of like a beat for beat of the first Fantastic Four, or is this
it's a broad
wink?
Strokes.
Okay, so it's really broad. It's not like we're hitting the exact.
Yeah, it has the same basic structure. So Fantastic Four #1 in 61 starts with the big 4 in the sky and the 4 heroes assembling. We do get that. And then you recap of their origin, and we do get that. And then, we take off and we fight the Mole Man and his monsters. So basically, yes, there's a little bit more shtick, I guess, for lack of a better word. But
so does Mickey call himself Mr. Fantastic when they're like, I'm horrible, I will call myself the Thing, and I'll call myself the Human Torch, and I'll be Mr. Fantastic? Do they do that whole? Because I think that would be just
fantastic.
I think that would be just hysterical if they did some of that off read the room humor.
Stretchy man. Yeah. Well, and the estate of Norm Macdonald would probably have words. They don't actually do that, and I swear I don't think they use code names directly. Donald says, now that I'm this thing.
Yeah.
But I don't think that any of them are just like, hey, you're Mr. Fantastic and I'm the Invisible Woman. Well, for one thing, because she's a mouse.
Right.
So
she's still a woman.
Mouster Fantastic. And she'd be like the Invisible Minnie. And
Goofy is
the Canine Torch.
Oh, Goofy is the Human Torch.
Yeah, Goofy is the Torch. Okay. Donald is the Thing. Minnie is the Invisible Mouse Woman. And,
do we need to see? Do we need to see the return of Super Goof?
Yes, I mean always.
I had to explain to someone who's like a nerd about comics and Disney and everything. I was like, "Oh, have you ever read Super Goof comics?" He's like, "I have no idea what that is." And I was like, how can you bring me all these
60s?
Yeah, how can you bring me all these weird, obscure comic things and not know who Super Goof is?
Not everybody had the childhood that we had. And one thing that is very important about the Midwest, where you and I both grew up, the Disney comics from Dell Publishing were omnipresent, partly because Dell's distributing hub was in Kansas City, as we mentioned, in the previous segment. So I don't know. I feel like the next issue, or the next What If crossover that promises what if Mickey and crew became the Avengers, is the one that I want to see, just because it features Goofy as the Hulk and Pluto as Ant-Man.
Oh,
and I'm hoping that they do finally try and address this, the problem.
They won't.
They should.
They won't.
Okay, well, it's either Goofy is not a dog or Mickey is engaging in some sort of weird slavery, and I don't like it. I don't know. I do think that Donald as the Thing is just a beautiful, beautiful visual. All in all, though, 4 slices of meatloaf for Marvel/Disney hyphen M dash what if dot 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 Mickey and Friends, comma, became the Fantastic Four, umlaut and tilde. Number one. Pretty solid book. I would definitely
not
check
a
it
number
out.
one because it's only a one shot.
It has a big number one right on the cover.
That's because Marvel doesn't know what they're doing. I'll go to my grave
that's
on
because
that.
Marvel knows exactly what you can go to your grave. You're wrong. But here's the deal. Okay, if it's a one shot, it's right there in the name. One.
Yeah, but it's not a number one shot. It's just one shot.
Is it okay? So how many comics do you have if you were to number them?
Oh, I would say I would have all of these comics.
So if I hand you 3 comics and you number them 1, this is number 1, number 2, number 3.
It depends.
If I hand you one comic, this is still number 1.
Are they? But I'm not going to say this is number 1, number 2, number 3 because I'm not going to. They could, depending on which way I put them in an order alphabetically. A could be 1, 2 could be B, 3 could be C, could be, or I rearrange them and just say, hey, this one has a cool character. I'm going to make this my number 1 comic. But unless they've got an
kind of Cliff Clavin nonsense.
No, that is literally first thing before you put numbers. You need to
listen. Your African God.
You need to take into account alphabetical order first, and then if it's an ongoing series, then 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't have if it's a one shot, it doesn't need to be a number 1.
Comic books are numbered, though.
No, they're not. Not all of them. I guarantee you, they are not. Okay.
Comic books are numbered.
No, they are not. I guarantee you. They are not numbered. Especially one shots are not always numbered across every publisher. The only one who consistently puts a number 1 on a one shot is Marvel. DC doesn't do it consistently. Archie Comics doesn't do it consistently. Boom Studios doesn't do it consistently. I guarantee you, and if the next word's out of your mouth, well, the indicia says, that's where I know that they don't put number 1s on one shots because I read those indicias, okay? So don't bring that shit up with me ever again because that is not how publishers do it. Marvel is the only one that is stupid enough to put a number 1 on a one shot, telling little kids, we're going to bring you the next adventure of Mickey Mouse and Friends Become the Fantastic Four number 2, and some poor little child is going to keep going back to the store and going, do they have the number 2 in yet, sir? And the person behind the counter is like, no, it's a one shot, you dumb kid, get the out of here. And then that kid will go away having a bitter approach to comic books. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why young kids don't read comic books anymore. Thank you, and good night. Okay. Rogue.
That was amazing.
The Savage Land. Number 1. Why do I know it's number 1? Because it's a 5-issue miniseries, Matthew. There will be a number 2. Here's the thing. I didn't know when I picked this book up. I was like, ooh, Rogue the Savage Land. This is, with all the chaos that is happening in the world of the X-Men, now that they're all doing their own thing, I thought, Rogue is going to go to the Savage Land and have an adventure. Great. What I didn't realize until I opened it up and read the inside front cover was this is one of those in-between stories.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you feel about in-between stories.
I'm actually sort of good with them.
Okay.
Up to a point. It's just that the story that this is in between came out when I was in high school.
Yeah. So this story takes place after Uncanny X-Men 247 from 1989. This is where Rogue, quote unquote, sacrifices herself by throwing the Master Mold into a portal.
Mm-hmm.
And she's at that time had Ms. Marvel's powers. This is the story of what happened after she went through the portal. She actually wound up in the Savage Land with little to no powers.
Mm-hmm.
She's very lonely. She's very upset because she's the only one around, which I've got some problems with this whole thing because she's like, oh, I spent all this time being sad and learning how the Savage world worked. But at the same time, she's like, I remember coming to the Savage Land and hearing stories of the Savage Land. So she should kind of be familiar with the Savage Land from the time she's been there before, or from the memories that she claims that she still holds on to from her fellow X-Men and people who she's stolen powers from. So that's a little bit of problematic. But then all of a sudden, Magneto shows up and he and Rogue are probably going to try to survive with one another. Magneto has said, I no longer want anything to do with mutants, and I certainly don't want anything to do with humans, those nasty, nasty people. And then suddenly KA-ZAR's big kitty cat shows up. And she's like, oh, this must be like Lassie. You know about Lassie, don't you, Magneto? And Magneto's like, yes, I know about the Lassie. And she's like, what's going on? Well, take us to KA-ZAR, boy. And it turns out KA-ZAR has been taken over by some fish people. And so now both Magneto and Rogue have agreed to go and save KA-ZAR in this Savage Land story. It's a little much. I thought this was going to be like Rogue having an adventure in the Savage Land by herself, and it kind of feels that way at the start, but it doesn't end that way. It suddenly becomes an ensemble piece. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, okay, not what I was expecting. Not knowing really what went on in those 1980s X-Men comics. I tried to get into the X-Men in the 80s, and believe me, that was a mistake. And so I don't know what I thought was going to happen in this book. It is by Tim Seeley, so I think it is competently written, even though there are some weird inconsistencies that, while make for a good story, if you peer too deeply into the pages, you will suddenly go, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. And that's fine. I think comic books can be that way a lot. And they do. Listen to this week's upcoming Legion Clubhouse episode for more on that. The art by Zulema Lavina, fantastic. I really like the art. It at times feels like it is borrowing heavily from the 80s and 90s take on Rogue, the over hyper pinup pose type Rogue that people were all in favor of and probably still are today. But then just the lush detail of the dinosaurs and the creatures that Rogue encounters, and just the lush land environment of the Savage Land. Just the art is really, really, really well done. While this may not be a story that is from a time period of the X-Men that I am familiar with or want to be super familiar with, I still enjoyed this story as we get to expand upon a moment in time that no one ever really knew about. And so I'm giving this 4 slices of meatloaf out of 5. And I will say that if you are a nostalgia person, then I think Rogue the Savage Land #1 of 5 is going to hit those nostalgia points for you while adding a little bit more knowledge to your mythos. Now, if you're someone that is, once issue 748 came out, continuity was locked and nothing can happen in between 47 and 48, this may upset you, right? And I don't know from 247 on until the return of Rogue into the X-Men comics, if it was ever said that, oh yes, I went and spent time in the Savage Land, Shug. I don't know if there was ever a reference to her spending time in the Savage Land and that story was never covered. I feel like if it was, it would have been covered then as opposed to now.
Well, when Rogue threw the Master Mold through the Siege Perilous, the X-Men were all scattered through space and time, and they were mystically transformed by Merlin's daughter, Roma.
Oh, God. This is why I didn't like the X-Men in the 80s, ladies and gentlemen.
So Colossus, for instance, he suddenly was just a young painter named Nicholas, and Rogue was in the Savage Land. When they found Rogue, she was having a sort of a pseudo affair with Magneto. I believe that.
But did they follow that story in the pages of X-Men, or was it suddenly we went out looking and we found Rogue and she happened to be hooking up with Magneto?
There was some stuff about it.
Okay, so there was a parallel story. There was some parallel storytelling going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, Rogue was in the Savage Land between like X-Men 269 and 275. And then 275, they kind of revamped the team and Jim Lee went full on crazy and we got the team that we know, kind of the modern team.
Yeah.
That then led us into the 93 relaunch vamp.
Yeah. So this then sounds like it is the story in between the story of how Rogue and Magneto hooked up.
This is the rest of the story.
I mean, if you are into that kind of thing, then great. And I'm sure that it is Magneto, Rogue, and KA-ZAR fight fish people. I think that if that's the story, I think it's fine. I don't think that it's going to add to or subtract from any continuity that or beliefs that people have about what happened during those time periods or their memories. So I think nostalgia fans will get a kick out of this. As somebody who doesn't really know what's going on, again, see my comments, but I was, the story is easy enough to follow. If you know who Rogue is, you know who Magneto is, there is enough of a inner monologue that Rogue has throughout the issue that fills you in on some of the bigger gaps. Because the first time that I see Rogue fighting Ms. Marvel, and she's, wearing her Ms. Marvel costume and not her Captain Marvel costume, I was like, that's weird. I must have missed something in the pages of X-Men. Then you realize, oh no, this happened back in 1989. Then you're like, oh, okay, this makes perfect sense. Please proceed with the story. Whatever else you say, I will believe. So good writing, great art, 4 slices of meatloaf out of 5.
Nice.
Hey, listen, everybody, as we go through 2025, we want to make it to the end of 2025. We want to make it to 2026, and we can do that with your help. And we can do that when you become one of our heroes. Not a Rogue, not a Mickey Mouse and Friends, not a Fantastic Four, not a Mole Pete. I don't even know how that works because Pete's a dog. You can join us and become one of our heroes over at patreon.com/major spoilers. We haven't had any new bosses in the last couple of weeks, so that's a bit of a letdown. But you can sign up today for as little as $5 a month over at patreon.com/major spoilers, and you can get access to the Major Spoilers podcast pre-show. The pre-show this week, we talk about Matthew's 10 things and whether he should continue it or not. And so we dive in. And if you're somebody that's a creator and you're like small numbers kind of creators and you're like, I don't know what to do, there may be some advice that you may be to pick up on in that piece. If you are someone that wants to know a little bit more about the behind the scenes, what do you mean, Stephen, about making it to the end of 2025? Typically at the $10 a month level, we do a VIP chat where gold members get to ask questions and I tell them what's going on behind the scenes. At the either end of the year or very first of the year, I always do a year-end report, and a kind of a look forward that is made available to the public completely for free. So you can get a little taste of that. In fact, I put some samples of some potential shows that may happen if we get enough support. You can listen to that free right now at patreon.com/major spoilers. I know what you're saying, Stephen, you guys already do so much free stuff. Is there any more free stuff you could give us over at patreon.com/major spoilers? And the answer is, of course, dear listener, we always have something free for you at patreon.com/major spoilers. It's the Major Spoilers Book Club. Dr. Bradley, Will, and I have been reading books throughout 2024, and we're continuing into 2025. The January book is The Peripheral by William Gibson. You've got a couple of weeks to read that book if you've never read it before. And then at the end of the month, Brad and I will sit down and we will share our thoughts about that book. And it's free every month over at patreon.com/major spoilers. If you even wanted to go further, Matthew, you could actually sign up for a free membership at patreon.com/major spoilers. You'll get access to, titles of our posts. You'll get a little taste of things that we put out. Sometimes I will release stuff that is free to patrons only at any level, and that includes the free level, but it's not for the general public. That may be an incentive for you to go and check it out. What are you waiting for? Patreon.com/major spoilers. Let's talk Transformers. I hear they're more than meets the eye, Matthew.
Well,
I hear that they are robots in disguise. And certainly Void Rivals is a comic book in disguise, because when Void Rivals was being solicited, they were just like, hey, war waging on the Sacred Ring. What happens when 2 pilots crash land on a planet and they have to survive? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I've seen this movie. I also saw the Star Trek episode where the walls fell. I know exactly what's going to happen in this book. And then Robert Kirkman yank the rug out from everybody because our two heroes, Darok and Solia, on Darjan when the walls fell, they stumble across another crashed ship on this planetoid as they are trying to get back. They're from, spoiler alert, this is the story of the North going, not the Zax. This is the story of the star-bellied Sneeches and those without stars upon the R's.
With nose, yep.
So this is literally that story, okay? This is literally that story. You have two warring factions that are attached by a giant ring, and they have sworn never to see each other in the face, except they're exactly the same, except for the gemstone embedded in their heads. Literally the star bellies.
Yep. And these two characters are crashed, and they're like, oh no, our ships are destroyed. Wait, there's another ship over here.
And then suddenly,
what is this ship?
Oh, where am I? My name is Night Blast. Do not be afraid. Wait a minute.
Jet
what is that?
fire.
Oh no, Cybertron. 1,000,000 years. I must go now. And you're suddenly like, in literally 2 pages. In 2 pages, you're like, what? Is this a Transformers book? And sure enough, this is the opening of Transformers at Skybound Entertainment. So for that very reason alone, people should pick up this volume just to see how well Kirkman and De Felici pull off this magnificent stunt.
It is a big, beautiful troll. And it's the kind of troll that Kirkman actually excels at. You remember that the Walking Dead just sort of ended.
Yeah, just ended. He's just like, didn't tell anybody. Just, this is the last issue. See everybody.
And Kirkman was behind the hot new superhero in 2005 or 2006, Freedom Ring, where the whole point of the story was, what if somebody wasn't a good superhero and died horribly? But they introduced him and people kind of liked him. Sorry, I missed my button. I tried to mute, and what I actually did was I put a big emoji in the chat. So I apologize for that. So, but yeah, it's interesting, but it's also interesting to see what this is, because it kind of, as you mentioned, it does feel like its own crazy thing, and it's a little bit north and south and a little bit kind of, the enemy mine is there.
Yes.
But I also get bits of like Logan's Run, where both people think they know the whole story, but nobody knows the whole story. Yeah. This is like a 70s science fiction movie.
It is.
And instead of Charlton Heston finding the Statue of Liberty, Charlton Heston finds Jetfire. And Jetfire's like, you bastards. Now remember, the picture goes down as you go into your alt mode. And
what's really cool is they actually, in the comic, they do the sound effect of, and it's so cool to see that spelled out on the pages. It's like, it's very cool. That's all I will say. It's a very cool thing that I think Michael Bay didn't follow through correctly on in the movies. Yeah. But here it worked out very, very well. But that's so, Jetstar goes blasting off into space. And so we're left to continue this story of Darok and Solila as they try to make their way back to the Sacred Ring. And in the process, they run into other characters from the Transformers universe.
Yes. In the second issue, they run into a Skuxoid. And Skuxoids, of course, are the...
I know nothing about the Skuxoids.
They are foot soldiers of the Quintessons.
Which, again, I recognize their floating heads and tentacles, but I didn't know who they were.
Yeah, the thing that you need to know about a Skuxoid is A, Skuxoids are mercenaries, and B, I think they're voiced by Corey Burton. Okay. You got that going for you. But the Skuxoids tend to work for the agents of the Quintessons. We do actually see
creatures.
We see another Quintesson in here too. There's one that floats that has like a dragon face. So in episode 3, when we come and you see the dragon-faced guy with the tentacles and he's floating, that is also a Quintesson. It's just a different kind of Quintesson.
Yeah.
And of course, the ship that they try to get from the Quintessons is the quintessence ship from Transformers, the movie, 1986. So it is really interesting. And I honestly, I swear to you, when I read issue 1, and I read it a couple of months ago, as I was reviewing issue 15, I swear that they were going to take off their masks and they were going to be the bots who are the face of the Autobots and the Decepticons. You know what I mean?
Oh no, I don't
Where we
know.
were go-
I don't
Okay,
know. I don't
so
know.
the Autobots.
I mean,
to-
I'm an expert on all things Transformers, but you're
Right.
speaking some foreign language here, dude.
So the Autobots have a symbol that's red.
Oh,
And
okay,
so
I know what you're talking
where?
about. Yeah, okay, now I see
Yeah,
with
and then
the jewel in their
Decepticons have
heads.
that edgy purple one.
Yeah, no, if that, yes, that would have been perfect. That would have been a really
Right.
nice touch too. But instead, it's just like, wait, we're kind of being played, and they realize that our two characters realize they're kind of being played, and they have to go back to Solila's side of the ring, where Darak is charged with being a criminal of war, war criminal. They throw him in prison. And then Solila also gets thrown into prison because you're not supposed to show each other's faces. Because if you do, guess what? You'll realize you're all one and the same. And if you don't know who the enemy is, then why have a fight? Why have the guy that's going around and putting diamonds on everybody's forehead walks away with a lot of money, but the people of the Sacred Ring are left wandering the beaches, looking at their bellied sneeches. Only to realize by the end of this volume that the leader of one group and the leader of the other group know about this con all along. In fact, one of them is the father of Darak. And it's like, oh no, we know about this stuff. We know what each other's faces are. We are perpetuating this battle, whatever, for resources. To what end, we don't know by the end of volume 1, but it does appear that there's a resource issue that maybe if they just work together, it's very strange as you get to the end of that volume.
And it has quite possibly the greatest character name in the history of the universe, because Darak has a talking glove called Handroid.
Android, yes.
And Handroid is the best. Handroid gets the great lines. But as I go through this, I think the most fascinating part is they're showing us this established universe, and every once in a while it'll be like, oh, that's Senator Shockwave. Or here's a moment where you're like, was that, Hot Rod flying around? Hot Rod isn't in this volume, by the way, but you get what I'm saying. As you go through this, if you have never read anything Transformers, what you're getting just feels like science fiction world building.
Yeah.
It has some things in common with like Saga. A lot of it reminds me of the kind of things that we would see in heavy metal. It has elements of like Möbius's work, like the Incal, I can definitely see has an influence here. All of the stuff that we're seeing here is just, let's do some really crazy, wild stuff. But also the secret is this is happening in the world of the Transformers, the established world. And that, I think, is the most fascinating part, because I feel like it's always hardest when you're launching one of these books, and the first thing that anybody says is, where's Optimus Prime?
Right.
You do Avengers team, and they're like, where's my Iron Man and Captain America? They don't always have to be in it.
So Kirkman has been interviewed multiple times talking about why he does this, why he did this with The Walking Dead, why they didn't make a lot of fanfare with Invincible. And then same way with Void Rifles. Why didn't you announce that you had the Transformers properties? Because he likes that surprise. He's like, I like going into the comic book shop on New Comic Book Day and picking something up and then just realizing that it's totally blowing my mind. Had this announcement been out months in advance that, Skybound Entertainment has the Transformers and G.I. Joe properties, Kirkman is about to launch a new Transformers series, there would have been a lot of hype and probably a lot more critical eye and what is it where people are just negative all the time about stuff?
The internet?
Yes. No, where they would be the opposite. What I always accuse you of being.
A comic fan?
No. Where you're instantly like, I have no interest in the hot pop. Yeah, contrarian. People would go in and rate the Transformers book to be contrarians because they just want to jump onto that bandwagon. So the cool thing about this is Kirkman announces new book, The Void Rivals, and it's a raging war in space. And you're like, okay. I'll go check it out. Kirkman has a pretty good, holy crap, this is a Transformers book. And then suddenly all you can talk about is how excited you were to realize that this was a Transformers book. And here's what you know so far. And holy crap, what does this mean? And now all of a sudden you're excited about what you read in the comic book, as opposed to going in and going, well, I doubt Robert Kirkman is going to make a good Transformers book because he's just Robert Kirkman. That kind of response that the internet does. And so I think that this was very masterfully done on that level. The same way when we look at Radiant Black and you go in and you're like, I'm pretty sure this is just a Power Rangers ripoff. And then you get 10 issues in and you're like, no, this is really something different. That is something radically different than what I expected. And I'm pleased with these results. So I think that's what really works about Void Rivals, because then it's like, okay, we've given you a little nibble about there's Transformers in this world. Now, how about a Transformers comic? And then people are like, don't Transformers and G.I. Joe both belong to Hasbro? Oh, that's right. Robert Kirkman and Skybound Entertainment says, maybe you've heard of this guy, Duke, or Cobra Commander, or Scarlet, or Destro. Oh, you want a whole G.I. Joe and Transformers series? Here you go, ladies and gentlemen. So I think that this gimmick, I don't know how many more times Kirkman can do this gimmick, but I think in the case of Void Rivals and the Transformers, it played out perfectly.
And later on, we do bump into characters from Cobra Law, because this is like a big shared universe.
Yeah.
And we do also, as we go through this arc, have little bits and pieces of what's, coming, because the real question behind this is why is this ring here? Why is this ring separated? What are we actually doing? It turns out that maybe it has something to do with Zerta being Zerta Trion.
Yeah.
And Zerta Trion, of course,
I have no idea what you're
Alpha
talking about.
Trion.
I know Seven's Arc 7. That's about all I know about Transformers.
Alpha, I will end you. I will find you. I have your address. I don't want to go there anytime soon, but yeah. So Alpha Trion is a very, very important figure. There's also a little question about if Zerta Trion is on one side, who's on the other side. And I'm not saying that it's Vector Theta, but it's aliens. Yeah, and that, I think, is this book's greatest strength and also the weakness for me.
You think? Why?
Is that, well, there are deep cuts in here that are so deep that I had to go digging. And I love that. I enjoy a book that makes me go, hey, that's something. I know that's something.
That's what I loved about 52. Yeah, that's what I loved about 52.
I don't know that everybody shares that. And I feel like, to some degree, through that first issue, it really did feel like a Darmok and Jalad at Telagra riff. And then all of a sudden, boom, Jetfire. But then it also kept going with Darok and Solila. And Solila?
I think that's how you say her name. That's how I'm saying her name.
I don't know.
Solila or Solila.
Solila?
Yeah. Solila.
Solila, my love. Any case. Yeah, I feel like that's also the point where if you're really looking for a lot of Transformers or a lot of G.I. Joe, this isn't that.
Not yet.
This is a cool 70s science fiction story that's going to end with everybody dead and a musical theme that goes, wow.
Where they're all touching some guy with a beard going, tell us what these wrinkles are.
Right. Or somebody's face is going to flip up and it's going to show that they're actually a Cybertronian all along. Wow.
I like the art in this. I thought it was great. I like the surprise of reading this. Now, I read this when the issue first came out because everybody was kind of like silently telling me, Stephen, you probably ought to read this book and talk about it on Major Spoilers. I was like, yeah, okay. So I knew that there was a lot of stuff about to happen. So let me ask you this. For someone who has not read Void Rivals, but knows that Transformers and G.I. Joe and all that stuff is over at Skybound Entertainment, they just haven't gotten around to reading it. Is this book as impactful as reading it for the first time, not knowing any of that stuff?
Yeah, but in a different way. Because I feel sometimes, especially with a Kirkman book, that surprise is kind of baked into the crust. You've got that moment of, whoa, what just happened? But you've also had that moment where you and I will occasionally mock each other because I don't necessarily care about a zeitgeist. And if something comes up and it's like, I don't feel like I want to see that right now, I'll wait, a month, 2 months, or a year.
Contrarian.
But you have said to me, what's the point of watching something if I can't be part of the the
conversation
discussion about it?
The water cooler. Yeah.
Well, maybe I don't care what the conversation has to say. Maybe it's one of those things where I'm not a contrarian. Maybe you're just a joiner.
Maybe you should come and be social with the rest of us, as my mom would say.
Maybe I should.
Maybe I just want to stay up here and read comic books, Mom. Leave me alone.
Leave me alone. It's just me and Super Goof and this chair and this plant.
Man, I spent first time I ever read Super Goof. I bet I spent a week trying to figure out what a goober pea was.
Oh,
I was like, Mom, do we have any goober peas around? And she's like, what? And then finally we're like, oh, just peanuts. Yeah. Oh, yep. And then we went to Plains, Georgia, and I still didn't get a goober pea that turned me into a superhero.
Yeah. How do you think Jimmy Carter lived for 100 years?
Man, it was fun. I was maybe 8 when I went to Plains, Georgia. That was an interesting experience.
Oh, he'd have been actually the president.
No, it was the year after he was the president. Yeah,
after he was elected.
Yeah, it was a year after he left office. So maybe it was like 80.
So that would have been 81.
Yeah, that would have been 80, 81. Yeah, that's when I went. So
yeah, cool.
Yeah,
and I think that it will be impactful in a different way. Just like if you know all of the backstory of Jetfire and how he used to be a Decepticon, but then he became an Autobot. But it turns out that in some continuities they call him Skyfire because Jetfire is copyrighted, and technically his action figure is just a Gundam. You have a lot of baggage there that you really won't need. But it's also something where there's a lot of baggage there that you won't miss.
Yeah, right.
And
because
that I think is the part of the story that works the best, in that this is kind of a lower decks approach to Transformers.
Yeah. And the other thing
is out there, war is going on, but this is what's happening to the guys down in Sector
in the trenches. Yeah,
growing from Sector 5.
At least in the pages of Void Rivals, because this is the thing. This is not a continuity. This is not a continuation of any other Transformers series.
Right.
Likewise, when the G.I. Joe part gets blended in with this, the G.I. Joes that are part of the Energon or Energon universe are not the same G.I. Joe as the ongoing G.I. Joe series at Skybound Entertainment, written and illustrated by Larry Hama. So keep that in mind, because over the next couple of weeks, we will be looking at this entire universe that has been created over the last couple of years. So next week, for example, we are looking at Transformers Volume 1. Then we are going to be looking at the G.I. Joe miniseries, Duke, Cobra Commander, Scarlet, and Destro, before we wrap everything up at the end of February with the current issues of the new G.I. Joe series, which again, separate from G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, which is a continuation and an ongoing series from Marvel and wherever else it has been over the last 30 years.
I want to say that it was at IDW.
I think it was at IDW. That's why IDW lost a license and it went back over to Marvel, is because of a character that was created for that, and a bunch of fans did their whole stupid fandom thing and flipped out and called IDW and actually called Hasbro and berated Hasbro until that license ended. So there you go. So I just want people to keep that in mind. So if you don't know anything about the Transformers, if you don't know anything about G.I. Joe, maybe you watched the cartoons when you were a kid, this is kind of like a launching point for an Ultimate Universe version of Transformers and G.I. Joe. And I got to tell you, it's fun and it's interesting, and it goes places that you don't expect things to go. one of my biggest, and I'll just give you a little preview. One of my big complaints about these toy cartoons is that nobody dies. And oh boy, there are going to be people that die. There aren't parachutes that just magically pop open when a airplane blows up, Matthew. I'll just say that.
Well, they never were magic. You had to pull the little thing.
Yeah. Well, people know what I'm talking about. So I also would say that this is a good series to pick up. I think you will enjoy it. I think it's got a lot of surprises. And I think that even if you don't want Transformers, because that's the other weird thing about this is it's like you're invested in the Darrock and Solila story. And it's like, you keep cutting away to these robots and bounty hunter guys that I don't really care anything about. And then you're back to these two and you're like, oh yeah, this is what I want. So you can read that on a couple of different levels. If you're a Transformers fan, you're like, I don't care about these Sneeches. I want to get back to the Transformers. Don't worry, it happens in this book. So my recommendation is if you like surprises, if you want to get in on the ground level of a new universe of comics, this is the place where you want to start with Void Rivals, More Than Meets the Eye, Volume 1 from Skybound Entertainment. The trade paperback was released just around this time last year, so it hasn't been on the shelves for that long. Matthew, final thoughts from you.
This is good. I feel like the art is kind of dirty and gritty in a Star Wars way that really fits the narrative. And seeing glimpses of things like, oh, well, what's going on? What's over on Cybertron is who?
Yeah.
Wait, okay, that's definitely Shockwave. Shockwave is a jerk. Run away from Shockwave. But yeah, that's interesting stuff. And I do like a story that hints at a greater shared universe that we don't know about or that you won't see until you read another book or until we get to that point. So yeah, this is kind of like it's a standalone series, but it's also sort of an aperitif for the entire Energon universe.
Yeah.
And it's very successful at being both.
Yeah, very good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps it up for this issue. Thank you so much for listening. If you found value in this show, if you laughed, if you cried, if you got a good comic book recommendation to pick up this week, we would love for you to join us on our Patreon page where you can find even more fun, including the Major Spoilers Podcast pre-show. You can find out more and sign up today at patreon.com/Major Spoilers. So until next time, remember, we know that you love comics. We do too. And we will talk with you soon.
If I had the X-ray vision of a Superman, I could save a few bucks and stand around and read through the covers of the comics on the stand. But although every other page would be backwards, I suppose I could still read the evens and the odds. Well, I don't know. Guess I haven't thought this all the way through. Plus, as soon as the comic book store guy knew, they kicked my butt out on the corner. What a major spoiler! What a major spoiler! Think about a better way. If I was hulking green or gray, I could just bust through that brick wall, take their comic books away. But then the little meat would deal with all the tanks and bombs and guns. Have you ever tried to read a series with all that going on? Guess I need to rethink this plan. How would I back and board my comics with such huge hands? Guess I already told ya. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Yeah. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. If I'm stark raving rich like a man of iron, I might not be surprised to find that I might actually have the heart cold to follow an entire storyline. But would I really even need to read up on all those escapades? I mean, who needs such distractions when your sister's such a babe? But the downside is such a beast. Being shot up in a fun, be in the Middle East with a gang sign throwing soldier. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Yeah. What a major spoiler. Whoa. What a major spoiler.
This podcast is copyright 2025 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.